welcome to Happiness by Habit. Isn't miscommunication the worst? Don't we all feel the push, pull of conflict, of that heaviness of the Sunday scaries because work is no longer fun, assuming it ever was? I personally don't like any of that. And I want to get better at communicating better and creating a workplace where everyone wants to show up. That's why I am so thrilled about today's guest, Jenn Whitmer. Jenn Whitmer is a force of nature, a self-proclaimed recovering conflict avoider with 20 plus years of experience leading groups in every setting you can imagine, schools, volunteer groups, and even the trickiest of all, herself. She's an international speaker, consultant, joy bringer, I love that one, and certified Enneagram coach. Here is the kicker. She doesn't just talk about communication and conflict resolution. She's lived it. With graduate certificates in music, education, theology, and leadership, and a master's in communication and culture, and years of training in conflict resolution, she's a true expert in helping people and teams move from not another meeting to, hey, maybe I don't hate Mondays. She also loves Ted Lasso, and who doesn't really, and has a dream of turning life into a musical. She's fun, insightful, and just the perfect person to help us figure out how to bring joy back into our lives. Welcome to the show, dear Jenn. Happiness by Habit.
I'm so excited to be here.
I'm glad. So are we. Let's talk about recovering conflict avoider. That's I feel like a lot of us can relate to that. Maybe I imagine your journey to becoming a conflict resolution expert and joy bringer wasn't exactly a mood sailing. What did you
Yeah, I used to think I was really good at conflict and I didn't avoid it. So my family is a very large, loud Italian-American family, and there's lots of talking back and forth and lots of hands, but there's not actually real conflict where you talk about something. And I didn't realize that until much later. I thought, oh yeah, I'm fine with conflict because I was fine with volume. I was fine with, a lot of voices talking at the same time, which is not the same thing as conflict. And so it wasn't until I was in a horribly toxic work environment that I started to realize that, conflict isn't what I think it is. It's not just discussions in this way, and seeing how conflict was so truly avoided and how frustrating I found that, and then realizing I wasn't as equipped to handle that conflict like I thought that I was, because I knew that raising my voice wasn't going to work. Like that didn't solve anything, but I just avoided it by, it's not that bad. It's fine, because I could deal with it.
Right.
Well, what happens for many of us who are conflict avoiders, when we just deal with it, it grows and grows and grows and grows until it becomes massive. And what I have learned over time is that the pain of broken relationships is far greater than the pain of conflict. Like actually facing conflict, digging in with people, figuring out what's going on is a much lower pain threshold than losing relationships, losing jobs, losing communities. That is far greater of a pain. And so that is how I made this journey from like, I'm great at conflict, but actually I was just avoiding it by reframing it all the time and saying it was fine, to really discovering the power of how facing conflict not only brings you closer together and brings relationships into better alignment, it actually creates more creativity. It creates better ideas, all these other things that we also really want, especially as leaders in life.
Absolutely. A lot of people think that because they don't talk about the conflict, it's not there anymore, but it's definitely there and it's growing and making it worse. What do you think is about conflict that makes so many of us run the other direction? And why do I avoid it?
Yeah, so many of us, the vast majority of people do not enjoy conflict. There are a few people, they like to be on X or like they, they kind of argue in different places. But most of us fear conflict for a couple different reasons. One of them is we're afraid that if we have conflict, then someone is either going to be mad at us, which is like a surface level concern. It's really deeper of like, am I going to experience pain? Am I going to be rejected? Am I going to lose connection? Is it going to get in the way of me achieving my goal? Am I going to have to compromise myself? Am I going to get into this and not know something? Am I going to do the wrong thing? Those are the reasons we don't like conflict. And we're afraid of all of these different reasons at varying levels, whatever recipe of those things you put together. And so that starts to loom really large in our mind, and those fears take over, and we start to make assumptions about what is really happening instead of facing the conflict because we're so afraid of those, the rejection, the loss of connection, the pain, whatever that is.
Yes, fascinating. Since the podcast is all about building happiness through habits, I would love to know what are some happiness habits you recommend, either for yourself or for the people you coach.
Oh, yeah. So happiness habits are really boring. Honestly, they're super boring. And I have discovered over time that my life works better and I have a better experience in my life when I have some really helpful rhythms and rituals. I don't love the word routine. It really kind of, I don't know, it just feels restrictive. It feels boring. But rhythm, I grew up as a music teacher. I still am a musician. So rhythm makes sense to me, where it ebbs and flows and there can be different tempos and changes to things, but there's still a predictability to it. And so some of my best rhythms are a shutdown and startup ritual to my workday. So at night, at the end of my workday, I review what I have done and kind of make the list. I make the list for the next day. I use a top 3 system. So what are the top 3 things I need to get done? What is everything else that I can do? Or if I have time to do, I try to predict based on my schedule the next day. So I look at my schedule the next day. Okay, what's realistic that can happen in this day? I try to record a daily win. That's a habit I'm trying to build. I always do it at the end of a week. I do wins and wisdom at the end of the week for myself, but I'm trying to build a habit of a daily win. And then what that does for me is I know what my schedule is the next day. I'm not worrying about what am I doing tomorrow. And then I've already pre-decided what's happening tomorrow. And then in the morning, I have a startup ritual where I look at some cards, I say some affirmations and reminders of things that I want to do and be. And I have a journal and a devotional that I do. And then I look at the list that I made the day before. What are these top 3 things? And I start based on what my schedule is and what that is. I don't start by checking my email. I don't start by opening up Instagram. I don't start with LinkedIn. I start with, what am I supposed to do today? What's my purpose? What is my intention for today? And so I call that being the boss at night and the employee in the morning. And I've done that for years, even when I didn't run my own business. And that is one of the best happiness habits because I feel like I have agency and I'm running my day rather than my day running me. And it's not always perfect. I don't always do it perfectly every day. I mean, please don't get me wrong, but that particular ritual for me creates so much peace and calm that when I leave my desk and I walk out that door, I know that I have accomplished or I have settled that I haven't accomplished, whatever that is for the day. And I am prepared well for the next day, which I sleep better. My anxiety is lower. So that's my favorite work one. The other one that is just life in general that my kids will roll their eyes all day long, that I always say a good morning starts the night before. So like setting out your things at night. What am I doing tomorrow? That same kind of concept really in my regular life. If I can set up the coffee, if I can set up what I'm having, great. But at least I know what I'm doing. I have decided what I'm going to wear, all of that that habit makes mornings, because I am not a morning person in any way, shape, or form. Please don't talk to me before a couple hours. I'm just not with it. And that a good morning starts the night before. Lots of people talk about morning routines, which I think are important, but I think your shutdown, nighttime rituals and rhythms are far more important than the morning. And those two are probably the biggest habits that set me up for enjoying life, because I know when I get to have fun, I know what are the tasks I have to do, who I get to see, all of those different things. There's lots of margin in there, but those two things set me up for success.
I love that. And it's very important and crucial how you choose the words that you choose for your daily routines. I love the rhythm versus routine, because routine by default sounds very boring, as you said, and rhythm is has a different flair to it that definitely makes it more fun. like that very much. So let's talk about the role of joy at work.
Yeah.
Okay. One of your big themes is joy at work, which is such a refreshing concept. I feel like joy and work are two words that most people would put them together, but I feel like I definitely think is a thing. And why do you think joy is so undervalued in the workplace?
Well, let me tell a story first. So I
Please
started
do.
my career as a music teacher. I taught kindergarten through eighth grade music. And the first year I came, I was a very different teacher than they had had previously. So I was shifting culture. I was 22. Working with the oldest kids were 14. I mean, like they're 8 years younger than I am. But I always, at this concert level, when they would come for performances, I would always tell the kids, don't sing this one at home. Don't tell your parents this one is happening. We're only going to practice it at school. If it gets stuck in your head and you start singing it in the car, take a breath and hold it in, because this is the mommy cry song. And so that's what I would tell them. And so we had our first concert. And so I've got, 100 plus kids on the stage, and we're singing this song, and the kids are so excited. They're like giddy with because they know what's coming, and their parents are, watching. And then what happened was the parents cried because it was such a beautiful piece. They hadn't heard it before. It was new. It was novel. They hadn't had a concert in a long time as well because of the previous teacher. And this emotional connection was happening. And I tell that story because that was joyful. It was amazing. There were tears. There was work. I mean, if you have ever worked with any number of children, getting 100 kids to get on a riser in order without talking is a feat. And there's lots of work that goes into that. Teaching them the song, getting them ready. There's pedagogical things. There's all kinds of stuff that happens with that. But I knew that was connected to my larger purpose, which was connecting people together, helping them have an experience together. And so work and joy are not the opposite of each other. I'm sure you've got experiences, where you're like, it didn't even feel like work. It was my favorite part of my job.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. And so there's those kinds of moments of joy are the center to where you are the most successful. Time disappears. It's almost effortless. Not that you're not working, but it almost feels effortless in some ways because it comes either naturally or you've built the skill to do it so well that you've mastered it in some way. Gay Hendricks calls that your zone of genius. Other people call it flow. It has to do with your play personality and your Enneagram personality. Like all of these things come together, and it's connected to a larger purpose. Those moments where you experience that joy can be greater at work. And when we have more of those, we are better at what we do. We're more successful, not only at the tasks, the actual tasks, but the purpose of why we're working. The opposite of joy isn't work, it's toil. So toil are meaningless tasks, things that you don't understand why you're doing. It's disconnected from purpose. It's also something that you may not be capable or highly skilled at or resourced to do. If you've ever been, somebody goes on vacation and you get all of their work, for 2 weeks or whatever, you're like, well, that is rarely joyful, and it can feel like toil if you're not resourced to do that. If you don't have enough time, or you don't have enough people, or you don't have the right tools, you're trying to build a house with a screwdriver and a saw, that's not enough, you don't have enough resources. That's toil. And at work, when we experience too much toil, that is when we become disengaged because we're disconnected to purpose. We don't have enough to do what we're supposed to be doing. And what that means is we're less effective. So all these productivity metrics that companies like to use are really low. And it's not because people aren't working. It's because they're working in ineffective, toil, downtrodden ways because people are trying to quote unquote maximize productivity. And if we instead put joy at the center and who is doing the most joyful work? Like what is their best work where they're in their zone of genius, where it fits their skill set, their personality, all those things, and it brings them joy and is connected to a larger purpose, then people are almost a third more productive. It's like 32 and some odd percent more productive when you are experiencing joy. And I mean, we all know that there are parts of our job we don't like. later today, I have to talk to my bookkeeper about some, tax stuff that we're getting ready for. I have a bookkeeper for that very reason, because I don't want to do it myself. Like I have learned to outsource that. But those are things I don't like to do. And I still have to. And so it's
Right.
not that we just get to spend every moment of every day in the most joyful part of our work. But what research is showing us is that when you spend 35% of your day or your time at work in that joyful space, in the work that you love, that you're resourced for, you're skilled at, it's connected to purpose, and then the other part of the ratio is only 10% in work that is toil, you are the most highly engaged, usually typically inspired, most productive worker. That's just as the individual. There's all kinds of other statistics about one person experiencing joy makes the whole team 25% more effective. There's all kinds of stuff. But that ratio of basically a little more than a third of your time being spent in your best and most joyful work feels really attainable. If only 10% of your time is spent doing the stuff that feels like toil, because there's all that stuff in the middle. Like
Right.
there's 55
That needs
some
to
odd
be
percent in the
done
middle.
anyway. Right.
Yeah. So that's why when we do that, when we have joy at work, all these other things that companies want, they talk about productivity, they talk about engagement, and those are metrics that are what I call lagging indicators. They're the things that come behind joy. And also profit. Companies that center joy and trust in general outperform every other company. And they've been tracking it for about 35, 40 years. And those on like the S&P 500, they're 4 times more profitable than the other type of company. So it's all the things that we want, that we think that we want at work, efficiency, productivity, and profit actually comes when we put joy at the center. And so that's why I think joy is such a key part of what we experience at work.
It's like a no-brainer. Much better to put joy at the center. You get better profits, employee retention, happier people is a win-win for sure. When do you
Absolutely.
think about great leaders, what role does conflict resolution play in their success?
Yeah, and great leaders, and this has connection to joy as well, because conflict is inevitable. So you are not a bad leader because there's conflict. Like I always want to tell people that, like, it's not because you're bad. It's not because your people are bad. Now you might need some skill in solving conflict, but it's because you're human and we live in an imperfect world. And Kate Bowler always says there's no cure for being human. So we have this inevitability of conflict. So rather than avoid or, just try to shove it under the rug or attack it in a way that doesn't produce results, understanding what conflict really is brings the level of toil down. And so that's how it's connected to joy. And when you have good, healthy conflict, we talked about earlier, you have better ideas, you have more innovation, you feel more connected to people because you've made it through something together. I mean, have you ever on a
For
team
sure.
when everybody made it to the end, I
a
used to
big
hate
difference.
running lines in volleyball. Like, oh my gosh, that just brings back so many awful memories. But like when we were finished and we'd fall on the floor of the gym, we all felt so connected of accomplishing something. And conflict can feel like that. You just have to know how to do it. And so as a leader, you're going to have different ideas come at you. That's not conflict. Conflict is when you have limited resources and differing goals. And the struggle between those two is what conflict is. So the opportunity for conflict will always exist because we have differing goals and limited resources all the time. And so figuring that out rather than making it personal or about a human, if you put it into that realm of limited resources and differing goals, now we're talking about problem solving. And problem solving is a key leadership skill as well. And it also brings back that idea of, oh, this isn't about your belonging isn't at stake. Like you aren't going to be rejected because you've brought a different idea, and you aren't going to be shunned because two people are disagreeing. So those types of things happen all the time because we don't know how to solve conflict, because we've put conflict into this realm of I have a personality clash, I have a problem with that person, they never do anything. We make all kinds of assumptions rather than saying, okay, what are the limited resources that we're dealing with? And what are the differing goals? Then we can start to solve problems, which makes you an excellent leader, and people will respect you because they understand what you're doing, and you bring people together through the running lines on the volleyball court. So you all have that moment of, at the end of like, okay, we've gotten through this together. I know that we can do this again.
Absolutely. A sense of accomplishment together. Are there any other tools or frameworks you love using when helping leaders addressing conflict with their teams?
Oh, there are lots of great skill sets and frameworks. So besides that idea, and I always break down the idea of limited resources and differing goals, the limited resources usually fall in a bucket of time, space, money, or people. And so sometimes I'll help leaders just write it out. What are the limited resources we're dealing with? Do we not have enough people to do this job? Is that actually a money issue? Is it a skill set issue? That's, people. Do we not have enough space? Like, do we need another office? Do we not have enough room to do this project? Whatever that is. Do we not have enough time? Is the deadline too, write that out, put it in a box. And on the other side, the thing people will always fight for, and this is going to be surprising, what the differing goals are is love, safety, and belonging. That's when people get really intense. And that's when conflict starts to feel personal because people's love, safety, and belonging feel at stake. So making sure that people know that their love, safety, and belonging isn't at stake. You're not going to lose your job. I'm not going to kick you out of the team. I'm not all of those kinds of things. Then you get to the secondary motivations of, I don't want to be rejected. I want to feel competent. I want to reach this goal. I want to have some semblance of agency and control, and all of those other ones come up. And then you've got, the even more surface level things of my particular bias toward this way of doing things is X, Y, or Z. So for me as a music teacher, I loved teaching music and I taught Kodai and other people taught Orff. And so, which is fine. Those are really high level things, the way you approach your work. But people are going to have conflict over those deep ones. So I have people break that out. So that's one really helpful way to do it. Another thing is I talk about conflict listening and asking really great questions, because Kwame Christian says this, and I learned it from him, that the person asking the questions is the one leading the conversation. So in any type of conflict, the more questions, the better questions, not more, but the better questions you ask, the more information you get to solve this limited resources and differing goals issue. And that works at home over who's putting away the laundry, and it works at work in who's accomplishing this task. And so I put these questions into 3 buckets, 3 categories of questions to ask, because there are a million different questions to ask. I have a freebie on my website called 20 phrases. So if you go to jennwhitmer.com/20-phrases, and it's 20 helpful phrases in difficult conversations, but they all fit in these buckets. And one is, how do you feel about this? What are your emotions around this? What are the emotions happening? What do you think? What do you think? Which is, where did you get your data? How did you come to this conclusion? Who told you that? All of those types of questions of what are the facts? And then what do you want to do? What action items do you want to take? If you could solve this problem, what would you do? So those 3 buckets of questions really help draw people out, and they not only feel listened to, you're actually listening to them, because the trick is after you ask the question, you do have to listen for the answer.
Right, that's key for sure.
Another conversation. But when you're asking great questions like that, you have a wealth of information, and 82 to 88%, depending on which study you look at, of conflict is caused by miscommunication. So often when you get to those questions, you find out you're not actually in conflict at all. It was just a miscommunication. You're not fighting over differing resources and limited resources and differing goals. You just had a miscommunication. So that's why the questions are so powerful in helping people resolve conflict.
That is so true. The miscommunications seem to be the biggest problem or challenge
Every time.
For conflicts. Interesting. Now we have to talk about Enneagram, because honestly, I've gone down so many rabbit holes with it. I know you use it to help teams and individuals to communicate better. For listeners who might not be familiar, can you please give us a quick overview of what is it and why it's so powerful for understanding ourselves and others?
Absolutely. So if you're kind of like, Ennea, what is she saying?
Exactly. Well,
you're not alone. I was initially an Enneagram rejecter. I was introduced to the Enneagram in college. I was sitting in a leadership program, and we had done the Myers-Briggs, which I also love. It's another personality framework. Some people call it MBTI or 16 personalities. We had done that, and it was great, and we loved it. And then we had another professor introduce us to the Enneagram, and it had these big scary words. And I remember sitting in this chair and looking at this piece of paper that had a purple grid, because it was a mimeographed sheet. I'm old enough that there were mimeographed sheets, and it was a copy of a mimeographed sheet, and it was these crazy words like sloth and gluttony, and I was like, what is this?
Hmm.
No, thank you. Well, when I was in that toxic work environment, I was reintroduced to the Enneagram by the school counselor, and it made so much sense at that time. Still the same scary words, but I think I was just ready to hear it, because what makes the Enneagram different than the Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinders or Colby or DISC or all these other working geniuses, all of these other great personality tools, they're fabulous tools, and I still use many of them, is that those tell you what you do or how you do it. They don't tell you why. And the Enneagram tells you why. Why do we think, act, and feel this way? What is that deep motivation? Back to that love, safety, and belonging. And so the Enneagram is divided into 9 types based on motivation. So in like your beautiful, lovely background of a bookshelf back there is so neat and pristine. I love it. I would dream to have that. It would be so great. But we might want that for very different reasons. So it's not about the outward behavior. It's about why you want something. What's motivating you? And the motivations aren't like, I want to have a successful life, or I want my family to love. Like, they are deep core motivations. And so when I describe the 9 types, I always want people to imagine like all of these motivations are on your bus, because everybody wants all of these, but one of them is driving. One of them is driving your bus, and all the others kind of come along for the ride. And you have to figure out which one is trying to drive, so you can take your personality off of the steering wheel and put yourself in that space. So your personality isn't driving the bus, you are. They get to influence, but you need to be the one driving. So if you imagine a circle and like a clock, but instead of 12 numbers, there's 9, and the 9 is at the top, like in that 12 position. So if you go just one click over counterclockwise, we're going to start with the 8s. And I'm just going to give a super quick around the circle what the 9 types are. And I like to start with the 8s, but we're going to go in order after that. So 8s have to maintain the self-image of being in control. They don't have to be in control, but they don't want to be controlled. So this idea is, if I stay in control, then no one can control me. That's what's happening for 8. So they don't want to be betrayed. They want to make sure that they're in control. 9s do not want to lose connection, and they think their deepest fear is conflict, but actually their deepest fear is losing connection. And so what happens often for 9s is they want to maintain the self-image of being easygoing, so nobody disconnects with them, but then they disconnect from themselves, and they get into this trouble of back and forth of like, oh, I don't want to say what I think because you might, disconnect with me, but then I've disconnected with myself, and they get exhausted. So it's this back and forth for 9s. Enneagram 1s want to be good, and the way they believe that they are good is if they do it right, if they are perfect. If I just do it right, then I'm good all the way through. And so they have a very strong inner critic that's always telling them that they've done it wrong. Enneagram 2s don't want to be rejected. They are the helpers, and so they will help everybody else in order to make themselves indispensable to everybody, because they want to maintain the self-image of being the one that you need, because then they've got some significance. That's where I'm going to get my love from. Enneagram 3s are like the walking motivational posters of the Enneagram. They are the goal setters. They are the achievers. They are, I like to call them the inventors, because they invent a persona that achieves whatever goal is necessary. So they want to maintain the self-image of being successful, because that's how they're going to get their validation and significance in love. If I earn it in this, like, I'm the winner, then you'll love me. And then 4s are almost feel like the opposite of 3s, because they want to be so deeply authentic to themselves, but they also at the same time feel like they're too much and not enough. And so they want to maintain the self-image of authenticity and deep in their emotions and what is really, really true. And if I'm really, really true, then people will see that I'm unique and they will love me, this kind of unique, special space. And then Enneagram 5s, they are looking to be safe. And so they want to maintain the self-image that they are competent through and through. They know everything. And so they want to maintain that safety by knowledge gathering. Like, they have to know the things. If I know, then I can stay safe, because the world, it's not okay to be comfortable in the world. So if I know, that's how I'm going to stay safe in that space. Enneagram 6s, I call them the loyal skeptics, because they are the ones who are also wanting to connect with other people, but really what they are afraid of is being blamed. And so they are always prepared. They want to be prepared They want to be prepared for you, for themselves, because they don't want to be abandoned, either physically or emotionally. So if I can always be prepared for you and for me, then I'm not going to be abandoned from the group. I'm going to stay with the group in that way. And then Enneagram 7s have to maintain this self-image of everything's okay, it's fine, it's great, because otherwise then they experience pain. And oftentimes Enneagram 7s, they'll say it's about boredom, it's about limitations, which is very, very true. But at the root, it's avoiding pain of whatever kind of pain it is. And so obviously these are not the motivations that people think of, when you're talking about personality at work, when you're like, oh, I get my energy from being with people, or I like things neat, or whatever. It's these deep core motivations that impact every thought and every feeling and every action that you do. And that's why I want people to learn what it is, so their personality isn't driving the bus and they are.
Fascinating. Very interesting. One of the things I love about your work is how you emphasize joy, not just for kids, but for adults too. How does play factor into creativity and flow, especially in the workplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I love talking about this. I love this question. So we think of play as, kids' work, which it totally is. But we as humans, it doesn't matter how old you are, we are biologically wired for play. So things that you find enjoyable, and play has a lot of different definitions. And I'm kind of working as I'm writing the book and researching, coming up with my own definition. But play is in general something that is enjoyable. It does have a set of rules, but it is for its own purpose. It's not for any specific purpose. And so some people love, pickleball is the latest new thing, like the last 5 years, it's like
fun,
this thing, and people like playing pickleball, and, so it's fun. There's a set of rules. A game is a way of having fun, but there are lots of different ways to play. My mother-in-law is an amazing artist, but that's not her career. That's been her hobby since I've known her since I was 4. And so she makes this beautiful art, and that is so fun for her to roam around Joann's and go into the craft store, and all that's so fun for her, which is not a game, but does have set of rules, and kind of time loses meaning, all of that kind of stuff. So play isn't one specific thing for everyone, but everybody needs to play. And when we translate that into the workplace, not only is play important for bonding, for team engagement, for building better relationships, for releasing and reducing stress, all of those things matter for what we typically think of as play. The next level up, and the thing that I like to help people do, is find their play personality and see how that relates to their highest level of work. So play, when it is honed and practiced, becomes your craft. So for me, I'm an explorer. That is one of the play personalities. And as an explorer, it makes perfect sense as a speaker and a workshop leader and a coach. I'm trying to figure out, where are we connecting in the audience and how is this going to go? I'm okay with the improvisation of it all and what's happening, because I'm exploring what's next and what's going to happen and how is this learning experience going to go. So at my highest craft, that exploration makes me an amazing speaker, and connecting with the audience and bringing a unique experience every time I come in front of an audience. It's not exactly the same. It's tailored because of my explorer personality. I have a friend who he is an archivist. That's his favorite, or collector is the personality type of that play personality. He has a list of every Indian restaurant he's ever been to in his entire life. He knows exactly where it is across the world. He's from the UK. I keep trying to get him to come here. But as a job, what he does is he's a therapist and a coach. And so he takes that collector and collects that information and sorts it into a way that he can give it back to the person, so they have this tangible way to then improve their lives. Sometimes people who are collectors turn into librarians, public accountants, because they collect information in this really detailed, organized way. They become organizers in that way. So your play personality becomes your best and highest work. Back to the things that bring you joy and feel like fun, feel like flow, all of that. There are 8 play personalities, but the idea is that, yes, we all need play as we traditionally think of play. And you have to work that in a way that is intentional. But when you really start to understand how you play, you can add that to your work and you will be more productive. You will have way more fun doing your work, because that's that space of flow where time disappears, you're so productive, and it just feels almost effortless.
Yeah, it ignites creativity also. It's really, really big game changer. Jen, I know you're a big reader and thinker. Is there any author or book that has profoundly shaped the way you're thinking about communication, joy, or leadership?
Oh my gosh, there are so many
Uh-huh.
great people who've gone before me. There is Gay Hendricks and his work has been really formative. Brene Brown's work has been very formative. Patrick Lencioni's work has been really formative. Enneagram teachers like Suzanne Stabile and Beatrice Chestnut and Helen Palmer. Helen Palmer is no longer with us, but her work is phenomenal. So I would say some of those people are the big names that other people probably know.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my favorite people who are less well known, who've really impacted me, are Jade Simmons. She is a classical pianist, concert pianist,
Uh-huh.
who's also an author and a keynote speaker and a hip hop artist in many ways. And she talks about purpose. And her definition of purpose isn't what you do. Purpose is what happens in other people when you do what you do. And so that idea, because I connect joy and purpose together, that's what makes it a little bit different than just happiness, that her work is less well known, but also really formative for me.
Interesting. For someone who wants to bring more joy, connection, and effective communication into their workspace or even their family, what's the next first step you would recommend for them? And is there a
Yeah.
mindset shift or a habit that especially is important to start with?
I think the most foundational tool you need as a leader, if you want to just be a leader, let alone if you want more joy in your life,
Mm-hmm.
is self-awareness. You have to understand yourself. Because if I were to be the person being like, well, joy comes from making a list of all the Indian restaurants I've ever been to, I would never in my life find that joyful. I might find
Right.
it fun for a moment, but that is not sustainable for Jenn Whitmer. That's not going
For
to happen.
sure.
But you're like, hey, I booked us tickets, get your passport, let's go. Okay.
Now we're talking.
I have to know that about myself. I also have to know about myself why the toaster on the counter every single day will drive me crazy and does not bother my husband and the other 4 people that live in this house. So like, what is that about me? Why am I frustrated? That
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness is what you need. And so I have a tool. I use the Enneagram, but I have an easy like understander. I call it a primer, whatever you want to call it, rather than a quiz online that can be really inaccurate, really hard to interpret, or just reading a whole book. So you can get that at jennwhitmer.com/Enneagram. So Jenn with 2 N's and Enneagram with 2 N's. So ENNEAGRAM. And you can download, it's a 6-page. It gives you what the personality really is. I didn't even talk about centers of intelligence, but the core motivations for each type. So you can start to understand yourself better.
Mm-hmm.
That is the foundation for everything. If you want to bring more joy to work, if you want to have better relationships, if you want to communicate better, I could give you all the tools. But if you don't know where you stand, it's going to be incredibly ineffective. So that is always where I tell people to start.
Yeah, I love that. Let's give the listeners a way to communicate with you. We're going to post your links here on the podcast, but I wanted for you to let us know what services do you offer and how they can get in touch with you, please.
Yeah. Well, I love it when a DM lands in any of my in Instagram or LinkedIn. So if you've listened to this, I would just love to hear what your thoughts were, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, what you liked. I always love that because that helps me know what is helping to people or what was confusing or what you want to know more about. I'm always up for that kind of conversation. And so I play the most on LinkedIn and Instagram. So I always say that LinkedIn is business up front, Instagram is party in the back. And you can find I am Jenn_Whitmer at almost everywhere you can find me. But jennwhitmer.com will have that, in the menu. You can find all of those things. That's where you can find free resources. And you can connect with me if you want to go deeper. If you're like, actually, I am ready to dig in some more, either with my team and I want to bring this in and help. How can you help me do this with my team? That's where you can find out more on my speaking page and set up some time with me to chat. Or if you individually want more, I have a leadership lab for women. I call it the Joyosity Leadership Lab. And we work together to create this positive culture, first of all, in themselves, to understand themselves and then to be better and more effective leaders without all of the exhaustion that happens for a lot of women. So those are the big things that I offer and always love helping people people find more joy without feeling like they have to do it all, without feeling the shame and guilt, and also without having to be somebody else. You will be the most effective when you are the most you. And that's what I want for people. And that is true for teams who aren't communicating well. We got to understand who you are. So I have workshops on all those different things and a few keynotes. And as I'm writing the book, I'm loving the research that's happening. And so I'd love to talk to people about that as well. It's not out yet, but it is coming as I'm writing
keep an eye
it. So
for that. That's awesome.
yeah.
Congrats, Jen. Thank you so much. Well, Jen, it was such a joy, literally. I feel like I've learned so much about communication, conflict resolution, and how to bring more fun and connection into our everyday life. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your laughter with us today, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. And for everyone listening, thank you for joining us today on Happiness by Habit. If you are feeling inspired or to bring a little more joy into your life, or just maybe to watch, please let us know and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much and have a happy rest of the day. Bye-bye.